Well, hello, you are in for another episode of the Be Awesome at Facility Management podcast with your hosts, Joshua Peach and Paul Anastasi. Welcome back, Paul. Another new room.
Another new room, yes.
What
Haven't been to the historic room yet.
you got a historic room in the Watertown house. That's pretty
Yeah,
good. That's
yeah.
good. Well, this episode is interesting. I'm going to let Paul basically drive this episode in a minute. We finished our episode, our comeback episode last week, which, man, I got to tell you, we'll probably get into a little of that, Paul. But the Avis stuff, you gave me so much homework. It was crazy. And what's funny is there's a lot about "We Try Harder," that slogan and how it was used, including the New England Patriots in the 1994 season that Avis was a sponsor, and that's what they talked about. But we're going to get into today's episode, which is you texted me and said, "Hey, do we want to have Justin on the podcast?" And Justin comes to us all the way from Alaska, but he's 2 or 3 rooms over from you right now.
Yep.
He's state representative for which it's District 7, right? Which is Kenai. And I'll let you fill in the districts and where you are and what you do. But we're going to talk all things Alaska, and Paul's going to drive this whole thing. But first and foremost, Justin, thanks for making time and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, my pleasure. I have actually listened to your podcast for a little while, and happy to say I have some swag at home. So been representing a long way away. That sounds like we have some mutual friends that I didn't know. So thanks for being on that.
Yeah,
Happy to be here.
Well, I expect when you get back up to the Kenai area that you and Lindsay and Tammy and Larry get together and do a formal Be Awesome picture pose, right on the river there with dip net season. That's kicked off this week, didn't it?
Yeah, it kicked off actually last week when I left. It was 2 days in, and the run was starting off a little slow, but we're back up and running for sure. There's a lot of fish to be caught.
So I'm going to let you guys start talking about schools and what you do and how you do it. But I do want to tell the audience, if you ever get the opportunity to go up to the Kenai Peninsula, whether you fish or you don't, it is one of the most incredible experiences in the month of July when dip net season starts. So first of all, I was laughing earlier that they've got a Walmart in town, and it's got the world's biggest parking lot. And it is because it is literally loaded with RVs. And up until recently, they were one of the only places in the world that had a Blockbuster video. Sorry to hear that it closed a couple of years ago, but it was one of the last remaining Blockbuster videos. But one of the most incredible sights to see are the fighting lines along the Kenai River, the dip netters that literally they're catching their fish for the year and bringing it home. If you're in Canada, if you're in Alaska and you go to a grocery store, you go to the seafood section, you buy fish, people look at you kind of funny. And so it's an amazing place, and got to be a really cool place to call home and in your service to try to make it better. We're gonna learn about. So more Paul. I'm gonna let you kind of drive some of the questions because I want to sit in the back and listen to you for this go around, and I'll probably chime in here on occasion.
We know how that goes. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard for you to do that. So I'm just as full disclosure. Why do I have a state rep from Alaska in my dining room? Not just to talk to Josh. That's the reason. Justin's actually family. Justin is married to my wife's niece. Justin's mother-in-law was my wife's sister. So they come all this way. Not often enough. So I took advantage of having Justin here, knowing now that he's not only in the legislature in Alaska, but he chairs the education committee. And when I asked him before we got on the air, the education committee, so you guys just deal with education, not facilities and not brick and mortar. And he said, no, we deal with it all. So knowing the state of our politics in the country, in the world, what makes a young Justin's a pharmacist as well. He's has 3 pharmacies in the state. So what would make a young pharmacist want to get in the crazy world of politics? How did that happen?
Actually, it was that's a super good question. It makes me reflect a little bit on why I made some decisions, but the main reason was I was involved already. So I had served on my city council for a number of years, and thought it was about giving back to your community. There's a real important aspect to that, I think, to make sure that you stay involved in the services that you use, the people that you rely on. You like to know what's happening. And in my particular field of pharmacy, there is a lot going on. It's really hard to actually run a pharmacy business. There's a lot of politics involved in it. And I was actually helping write some legislation for our Alaska Pharmacists Association, and noticed, wow, it's really hard to have this conversation with the people in the legislature because they have a hard time understanding healthcare, because there's not a lot of healthcare people in the Alaska legislature. So I came back home and had a conversation with Jessie that you mentioned, my wife, and said, "What do you think about being in politics at a higher level?" And she actually didn't hesitate. I thought she would tell me no straight off the bat. You're crazy. And she's like, "Wow, that actually, I think, you like serving, and, you'd be a good fit for it." So I asked a few more people, expecting them to tell me no, and they didn't. So I officially launched a campaign just about a year and a half ago, and somehow, some way, won a seat against an incumbent, and we were off and running. So a lot of the reasons why were pretty simple. I was involved already, and felt that my voice was one that was important to be heard.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, I've known for years that she was crazy. I just didn't realize how crazy you are.
Yeah, I was supposed to be the stabilizing influence.
Right. You were supposed to go, and she was going to say, "No, don't do it. Don't do it." And now look where you are. So, all right, how do you get to chair the education committee? Is that the freshman job that they give all the newbies? It's like, here, you take education. We don't want it.
Well, and before you do that, like, what's the lay of the land as far as your district, as far as, like, population and size? Because everything's so much larger. And as you've heard in some of the podcasts, one of my friends is another former politician, Santa Claus, North Pole, Alaska. And I mean, he won city council with a couple hundred votes, because there are not a lot of people, but there's a lot of land.
Yeah, so Santa Claus ran for the United States House seat recently. He was on the ballot with 49 other people.
Yeah,
actually didn't perform that poorly. A lot of good name recognition there. So that was awesome. I think that so most House districts are split based off of population. There's 40 House districts total, and they most people represent just about 20,000 folks. So some a little more and some a little less, but I represent just about 20,000 folks in the Kenai and Soldotna area, which is sister cities. I guess they're about 5 miles apart from each other.
Okay.
Which is a small distance in Alaska.
Oh yeah, very small. Yeah, the Walmart's in Kenai, and I live in Soldotna, so we try the Home Depot's in Kenai, so we travel back and forth often.
Here, when we travel 5 miles, I go across 4 school districts.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's funny how you get on these committees. I am a freshman legislator, so there is a lot of a learning experience that happens. So I had never been in a caucus meeting before. There was a lot of things to learn. I'd never been through the organization process. So our House is essentially split right down the middle. There's 21 Republicans and then 19 Democrats and independents. And so we struggled really to put a majority together. But once we did, it ended up being 19 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 2 independents that all joined forces. So I'm in the House majority. And then we sit in a caucus room, and we go around the room, and we go committee by committee. And so the first one up was, I think it was Labor and Commerce was the first one that we picked. And the Speaker of the House that we had all just elected said, "Who wants to chair Labor and Commerce? Raise your hand." And if more than two raised their hand, then the people in the room took a little silent vote, and then whoever won. So yeah, I happened to raise my hand for education, and there was not a lot else that went on with that. It was a little funny to me that there wasn't more credentials. Somebody should check my credentials for sure. But
it's like when they ask for volunteers to step forward off the line, and you look around and everyone else had stepped back, and you're still standing out front.
Yeah, and I found later on the reason why nobody stepped forward was education committee meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 a.m. And a lot of folks don't want to be in committee at 8 a.m. They would choose rather to be at the afternoon committee times. Yeah.
So what does it entail? I mean, it's not just education. You said it is facilities and all that. And like I don't know how your school districts are laid out, but like how far is it from one school to the next? And do you have one maintenance force that covers a school district? How does all that work?
Oh man, that's such a good question. And I did a lot of learning on this area this year. So my school district at home is the Kenai Peninsula School District. We actually cover a land area that is about the size of Rhode Island. So it's a pretty large land surface. We actually have 5 remote schools, so schools that are off the road system that you can only get to by either plane, float plane, or boat. So it's a really fascinating school district to serve in. We have central leadership that's actually in Soldotna, and a superintendent that's in Soldotna, but then that person has to travel all over that district to solve different issues at different places. One of the things that the state of Alaska has is a constitutional mandate to provide public education in locations that have 10 students or more. And so what that's led to is we have 54 school districts across the state, some large like mine, some really small where they'll be just on an island by themselves. So it's very challenging. Maintenance and facility services are typically done per district, but are funded in many ways at the state level. And so worked through, there's a system there that we call school bond debt reimbursement for facility upgrades, maintenance costs, and things like that the state is supposed to pay for. So we bring folks in, ask how things are going. Unfortunately, our state hasn't prioritized education funding for a while, and so we're some, I think it's $800 million behind in our maintenance, and I don't know how that compares necessarily to schools here in the Massachusetts, Boston area, but it's a little bit of jury rigging all the time, it seems like, for our maintenance folks trying to keep things going, especially in the face of lack of funding. But we have an interesting dilemma up there being so spread out.
Yeah, and you referenced Rhode Island. I did a quick Josh search while you were talking, and there's 66 school agencies in the state of Rhode Island.
Well, I get some better for you, because I worked with actually 29 of the 54 districts in Alaska in my career. One in our smallest district out of 6,000 in the United States when I was with the previous company was I'm trying to get the name of it. It was 16 students, or it was 26 students rather, 2 school buildings, and the facility director gets back and forth between the 2 by float plane. That is his company vehicle, if you will. But the Kenai borough is actually, I think the total landmass is about 25,000 square miles, isn't it? The total coverage of area, a lot of it is like uninhabitable woods and mountains and things. But that, to put in perspective, the square mileage is 2.5 times Massachusetts, and they've only got 9,000 kids in that whole district. Which is, and give or take, I'm throwing some of these numbers off my head and some of the stuff that I pulled up off of online. But when people think about, the size of Alaska, because it's all by itself, it's massive. I mean, it is literally massive, and the total number of students in Alaska is about 130,000, which is 2.5 times the number of students in all of Rhode Island. So I don't know how many Rhode Islands you can fit. That should be your Josh statistic check, Paul. How many Rhode Islands? How many Rhode Islands can we fit in Alaska? Let's do that real quick.
And while you're doing that, I'll tell you that the first time I went out to visit family in Alaska, we rented a Winnebago, and I drove forever. I mean, 3 days before I got to where they were, and I could park and rest. But when I looked at the map, I covered like this much of a map that's this big.
Yeah.
It's like there's no way you can cover it all.
Yeah, 425 Rhode Islands fit in Alaska.
Wow.
So, yeah, and I've done all of the ridiculous stuff because when you look at Kenai from Anchorage, it's not that far, but there's this thing called cold water in between it, so it's like a 15-minute flight, or it's like a 5-hour drive, and in the summer you run a risk of having, which I did, a forest fire that closes that one main road. I can't remember the name of it. There's that one road that you take that gets shut down in the summer. So
it's appropriately named Highway 1.
So do they have an interstate? I always wondered, why would we have an interstate in Alaska?
Yeah, no, we don't have
interstates. Alaska and Hawaii. I said, I'm wondering if they have an interstate highway, because that's just doesn't make sense to me.
They have roads that you drive on that just has a sign that says end, and that the road just stops.
Yeah.
When I was there, I noticed, I don't know if it's still this way, but the law was as long as your driving wheels were off the driving surface, you could camp and sleep in the vehicle. That's what they told me when I rented it. And I'm assuming that's all the same, because we know once the fishermen get there, they go anywhere.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think your deferred maintenance number, $800 million for the state, is probably fairly accurate. What's interesting is Alaska has always been fairly progressive from the state level for requirements of schools for preventive maintenance, which is in essence to extend the life and quality of the school buildings and the equipment that's in it. But yet still have those challenges. And I'm throwing darts, but I'm guessing it's all because of proximity. And I'm sure that you are having in Alaska the same thing we're having in the lower 48, which is staffing challenges. Or does everybody just want to work in Alaska?
No, people don't. We're actually having our, I think, 4th year of out migration. So our population declined about 2% in the last couple of years. Year over year, and that's concerning to folks in the legislature. Oil continues to be our big driving, economic growth factor, and we did just get approved to build 2 new pads, actually 3 new pads, called the Willow Project on the North Slope, which was a big deal. We haven't had new oil exploration there in a while, but one of the biggest challenges for our school system there is how remote a lot of our schools are. And just the cost of getting goods and services there. For example, a gentleman I got to know in the legislature lives very remote Alaska and was working on building his family home. And he was doing a lot of the work himself. But in order to get the actual equipment and products to his building site, which his building site is iced in about 7 months out of the year. So he had to order things a year in advance, make sure they were on the barge, was gone, and then they had essentially that window to get that in there. And then, of course, there's always delays and things like that. So we finally got the shipment in, a month late, and then, your building season is now just that 3 months essentially. And so it took him about 3 years to put his home together because building season's short, tough to get supplies. But imagine trying to build something knowing that there's not a hardware store close by. You had to get everything ordered right the first time, and you weren't really allowed to make mistakes because nothing's coming unless you.
Yeah, how do they do it with schools, building something that's so much square footage? And then my obvious question is, does the state fund school building in any percentage? I mean, is there oil money? I know there's a lot of oil money there, and is that any of that being funneled to the schools?
Yeah, there is a program that was around for a long time, and that was what I mentioned, called the school bond debt reimbursement. So local municipalities would take on the bond debt, but then the state would reimburse them that bond debt. Well, now the state is in a bad financial situation, so to speak. We've kind of put ourselves in a hole, and so those bond debt reimbursements aren't necessarily getting paid. So that's now falling back to the municipalities, and we've had some issues with some defaults and things like that on some of those reimbursements. But um, one other thing Alaska has as well is what we call a rural education attendance area. And these are Alaska's split up. We don't have counties, we have boroughs, and we just have a handful of them. And then the areas that are not incorporated into a borough, the state actually is the manager for those lands. And so the state is responsible for building schools, maintaining schools, and hiring and doing all of that stuff in those rural attendance areas. So
But that's got to be what, the size of a house that, as we know it. How many students are in those areas?
That's a good question. One I do not know the answer to, but it's actually a number of schools that are in. In fact, we have a member on our state school board who actually represents just the rural education attendance areas.
Wow. Because I know here what we do is we have a Mass School Building Authority, and they garnish 1 penny on the sales tax, and then you have to apply to them as a community for a school building, and then they'll pay a certain percentage. Some get 40%, some get 60%, depending on the need of your community. But it's all done through the sales tax.
And that's one of the issues that Alaska is debating currently is we have no state income tax and no state sales tax. And actually, the majority of our state services are funded by essentially taxes on oil revenue. And that's it. And the last few years, as oil revenue has declined, we've had to pull from a wealth fund that Alaska has called the Permanent Fund. And that generates the market was very good for the last few years, not so great now, but it generated about $20 billion in earnings over just a number of years. And so there was a lot of money in something called an earnings reserve account. And so typically that's paid out to the Alaskan people in the form of a dividend. Last year, I think it was $3,200 per resident. This year, it's going to be $1,300 because it was supposed to be $3,900, but the state, in order to fund services, is now dipping into that earnings reserve and not able to pay as large of a dividend to the people.
Wow.
How does that impact? I mean, that's $3,200 a year. It was supposed to go to $3,900 and then goes like that. Has to have a widespread impact on a lot of your, obviously your low income earners and low income livers up there.
It is the hot political topic of the day. If you land in Anchorage Airport and just start shouting, "I want my PFD," you'll find friends.
I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that next time I go.
Yeah, no, it's been a really hot topic since 2015. The governor at the time actually vetoed what is typically done by a formula, just a straight formula. It's and it's a little complicated, but at the end of every summer, the governor would make an announcement. Here's what the dividend formula has calculated that everyone will get. And then, in 2015, the governor at the time saw, wow, I'm not going to be able to fund government without, vetoing a portion of everyone's dividend. And so he did, and that set the precedent for the legislature and every year after that to essentially argue over the amount of the permanent fund dividend. And it creates some wild arguments. I mean, up and down and all around. And so last year was an election year. So as you would be accustomed to seeing, everyone had a more vested interest in granting a large dividend check. This year, not an election year. And so we saw the Senate, particularly this time, was very keen on a smaller dividend payment. And it creates some it is the thing
Yeah.
when you run for office in Alaska.
So I'm stuck on the oil thing, I think, and I know we had this conversation earlier in the week, probably a little later at night, so I don't recall all of the responses. But are they worried about everyone going electric? I mean, that's all we hear here is electric, electric, electric. I'm guessing it's kind of hard to do solar in Alaska when it's dark 6 months out of the year. But if everything goes electric, electric cars, electric heat, electric everything, is that going to, affect Alaska's oil delivery?
I spend a lot of time on this. My neck of the woods is a large oil and natural gas producer out of the area called the Cook Inlet. Actually, we are essentially the power generation for the bulk of our South Central, so Anchorage, the Kenai Peninsula, Wasilla, Palmer comes out of the Cook Inlet, and you have the conversation with people. Can we actually get to a place where we don't need fossil fuels anymore? And a lot, I mean a lot, is going to have to change in the world for us to not need oil production. I don't think we're anywhere near having passenger air travel not need jet engines on some level. We typically, asphalt is an oil or a petroleum product. The list kind of goes on and on about what petroleum products exist. So we're going to need to find alternatives for more than just gasoline. We're going to need to find alternatives for jet fuel, for asphalt, and a list of about 150 other things. And maybe there's a world we live in that doesn't need asphalt, but what are we going to drive our electric cars on? I'm not entirely certain how that works.
And I'm going to make a statement, and hopefully no one will reply, but I think that maybe we get to the point where we only have to depend on our oil and not foreign oil. And I know that's a whole big political juggernaut.
You just jumped on a big one there, huh?
Yeah. So that's just a statement. Nobody reply because we don't want to get into all that.
Well, I will say, Uncle Paul, you have made all the folks in Alaska very happy.
Yes.
That's what they would like too. But no, I think that a lot of the conversations I'm a part of, what they're saying is obviously there's a limited lifespan to fossil fuels. Until you have to go either look for more, hope there's more, find more. In order to keep energy costs down, one of the things we want to be able to do is extend the life of our fossil fuels. And so renewable energy obviously plays a role in the future of energy production. But as far as it taking over 100% of all energy, I think that's a long way away.
So you don't see schools there that are being built and trying to get geothermal wells in or any type of solar, and I mean they're still running oil burners and propane, and
solar would have to be a double ROI just because of the lack of sunlight for
but when you get sunlight, that's the thing. We're storing it, right? Yeah. We've got battery powers now. We're storing it. I don't know how long we can store it, but that might be the way that they head. But I mean, our schools now, people don't want to talk anything but electric, and then that's what we're doing. We built 3 elementary schools here. 2 of them were ground up, and we're at net zero. We're collecting all the energy that we need to run the schools, and that I think that's great. But everybody can't do that.
No, and especially the farther north you go, to you'd have to have geothermal energy in order to do it, because solar energy is going to be non-existent for 60 days at a minimum.
Yeah.
But there is geothermal resources there, and something we obviously can look into. But I think Alaska's a little ways away from being able to
even having those conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, and people. I mean, one of my good friends that I coach Little League with, He actually is he owns a solar panel company, and a lot of people use it. For 6 months out of the year, we go gangbusters on solar energy. So
Yeah.
and yeah, we have battery systems. Our local energy authority just installed a giant battery system that can actually hold enough energy to power our local grid for 72 hours in the case of an emergency, and that was a good upgrade.
Yeah.
So we're getting there.
Yeah. So getting back to the schools, and I guess a message that we like to get out and send back to different communities is that a lot of the facilities and custodial staff we're seeing here, I'm sure it's the same there because it seems to be the same across the country wherever we go. They don't really realize how much they're supporting the students and how much they're creating a safe, warm, dry place for children at least 6 hours a day, if not more. And for so many kids, that's the best and safest 6 hours of their day.
Well, yeah,
And if we can get that message out to those staffs just to let them know, because I don't think a lot of people realize, a lot of the custodians and maintenance guys don't realize it.
well, Justin's district probably doesn't have this, but I've got districts that it goes even beyond that. I mean, you have school districts in Alaska that are also school buildings that are also the funeral home. They're also the wedding chapel. They're also the birthday party location. Like they are out of the entire country, Alaska. When you say that education facilities are the fabric of the community in Alaska, hands down, even in your busy areas, your Anchorage, your Juneau, your Fairbanks, all those, they truly are the fabric of the community for everything that goes on. And so, from the vital importance of the care of those buildings, absolutely, like more so than anywhere, custodian and facilities, they need to understand that because they're used round the clock. I mean, I was invited to a wake. I got to remember the district that was up north of, I think, Wasilla. And that's when the school facility director was like, "Yeah, we're having a wake here tonight." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, you want to come check it out?" I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" They don't have a funeral home. There's no place to hold memorial services in that area of Alaska. It's a remote area. So, yeah.
No, that's so well said. And it is unique, I think, to Alaska to be in some of these places where the school and the building itself is actually, it's the shelter in a bad storm. It's the place where people gather to have a service or a birthday party, and sometimes that has a bit of a I don't know, just an oversight sometimes. We don't recognize how important those things are. And, but yeah, especially in rural Alaska, and the people there, and it's not just the custodial staff, it is teachers, it is administrators, it's everyone has, I've just seen their love for taking care of this place, and they value the importance of it immensely. And a lot of people are actually putting in their own money, their own time to take care of things in their schoolrooms, in their facilities, and because it is a very valuable part of their community.
So Josh, I think recently or coming up, he's going to speak to the smile givers morning and afternoon, the bus drivers. I can't imagine what the transportation system is like for schools in Alaska.
Yeah.
And I mean, there can't be many kids that walk to school.
No, we have a pretty robust bus program in the areas where there are roads to bus children. But boy, Alaska kids are tough, man. And so are Alaska school bus drivers. I mean, they're up, as most school bus drivers are, very, very early. But a school in Alaska does not get canceled for much. I mean, you got to have a good 12 inches of snow still standing in your roadway for a school to be canceled. So,
and they're driving in the dark both ways.
Both ways. Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
That's the thing.
What's even crazier is they don't use chemicals. They don't use like road salt in most places in Canada. They just they plow like a half inch above the where the snow is on the pavement, and they throw loose asphalt down. That's how you get your traction. I mean, most people have snow chains on their cars in the wintertime. And then and it's genius in my opinion, because you're not putting chemicals in the drinking water supply, and you're not putting it all over and deteriorating the road down. And then you just pick up your street sweepers in the spring and collect all the loose gravel and put it in a pit someplace and then reuse it again. So, I mean,
Josh is going to get me in trouble here because this is another hot button political topic here. Next thing you know, we'll be talking about fish, and then I'll really be in hot water. But
that's good.
This road brine situation is a big deal on the Kenai right now, because we did switch to having a salt brine on the Kenai roads. Prior to, you're exactly right. In a lot of places in Alaska, they still plow the way exactly what you're talking about. A lot of people want to go back to that because they're irritated that the brine, one, is bad for the watershed, and two, it corrodes their vehicle parts a lot faster. So yeah, that's something actually my office is currently working on.
Josh Peach for governor.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm moving.
Get the signs.
So I'm not smart. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm far from smart. I'm not a chemist, even though my company's got, periodic elements. But there is something to be said about the natural, putting stone down, not putting any chemicals down, not having to do any research on it. The rocks have been there since the beginning of time. It's scary. It's definitely not as comforting to drive on as a road that does use that brine solution and everything. But you got to think, if you're spraying something down on the pavement 12 to 14 hours or sometimes longer before the snow hits to raise the temperature of the pavement, to keep snow from coming on it, and that stuff's all got to run off someplace, along with the typical road stuff that you got, the leaky oil and leaky gas and everything else rolling off. And it's so beautiful up there. It's so pristine. Like, it's one of those just really amazing, untouched, you go to places in Alaska and you're just like, this is the way I think the world is supposed to be. Just sheer beauty. And, you don't want to do that. And I get it. And the fish, and we can get into the fish, because the way that you guys track the fish, and you don't need to worry. When I come to Alaska, I don't affect the fish population. Paul knows this. I don't catch. I did a 6-hour fishing trip on the Kenai River. Everybody, the fight lines on the side, the people in the middle. I wanted to catch a king salmon, and this guide said I never go out and not catch anything. 6 hours, didn't even catch a buzz because we couldn't bring the beer on the boat, and we just drove around and watched everybody else catch stuff. But that's. When you talk about revenue, another big source of revenue for you guys is tourism. And the big reason why you got tourism, my friend just got done with a cruise. Big reason why people go there is because it's beautiful. It's not because it's warm, although it's been warm this week in the 70s in most of the places they went. You want to keep that pristine beauty. So, yeah, I'm all for. I don't like the brine. They do it in my town. I don't like the chemicals. Breaking down to the car is a little thing. Breaking down to the world and the earth is the other thing. If we can figure out how to conserve this a little bit. So I'm with you. I don't know if I'm with you or not, but I'm with the fact that you shouldn't use brine and chemicals. I
think there's so I'll say the most irritating thing actually about not using it is when you get wide temperature variations. You have that little ice layer that begins to form, and then in the spots where cars stop and start a lot, one area will kind of melt a little bit more than the other. And so you'll get essentially like ice potholes in a bunch of different places. And that's, by the time you get around to like March and April and they're big, deep ice potholes, that's when you're kind of like, well, maybe we should have done something different. But up until then, it's usually okay.
Yeah.
I think you caught a few fish when we were in Maine, didn't you, Josh?
Yeah, well, little things. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, we're not talking king salmon.
I caught like bait fish for all you guys. So, no. Paul catches. Paul catches. He's the catcher of the group. Me, I'm the observer. I cast a couple times. My ADD kicks in, and then I'm out. I just might as well not even put a hook at the end. So,
we probably get him up flipping for reds then, Paul, because then you're never bored. It's fish, you're catching a fish every 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get into the politics of fishing but I did do a little bit of quick homework on you because I like to learn a little bit. I want to make sure that, I know a little bit of what's going on. And so I talked about dip netting, which dip netting, and we talk about Alaska and people being able to catch fish. I think it's the head of household gets 25 or 30 fish that they can keep, and then it's 15 or 20 per other additional household member. And if you live in Alaska and you don't have at least 2 deep freezers, then something's wrong, right? So, and this dip netting, Alaskans are the only ones that can do it. So I couldn't do it when I went up there. And they literally just put a net in the water that's about 6 feet around, and the fish swim into it. They hit the fish on the head, put it in the cooler, and they bring it home. When I was looking up with you just before we started, I just saw a headline that said set netting. I don't know what set netting is. So what is that?
Yeah, so set netting is it's a very traditional way of commercial fishing, especially on the Kenai Peninsula, but in other places in Alaska. So the name kind of gives you exactly what they're doing. They're setting a net, typically off the beach. So there is a long line that runs out, typically attached to a buoy with a weight at the bottom. You set it at low tide, you wait for the tide to come in, and as the fish run, they run into your net. It's become a bit of an issue. Fish and Game has closed down set net sites for the last 2 years, essentially affecting, hundreds of people's livelihood. They typically catch these fish in the net, and then they sell them to a seafood processor. That's how they make their living. So Fish and Game shut down set net sites in order to actually help salvage some of the king salmon run. That's been a big issue of late, especially in the Kenai and other rivers as well. The lack of the Chinook salmon returning to rivers to spawn, and that's actually our Kenai River has you can't fish for kings on it really right now at all, and we're trying to get that population built back up to sustainable levels. So the bill that I have in the Alaska House is actually a buyback program. There is a few hundred set net permits right now for the Kenai. And the bill would actually propose to buy back some of those permits to reduce the total number and allow people to get back open again. That way, by just reducing the volume of those set net sites, potentially we can reduce the volume of Chinook salmon being caught and still allow people to have a livelihood. So that's the impetus behind that bill. And it's a bill that's been around actually for about 8 years now and hasn't gotten through to the end.
My learning lesson of the day.
Yeah. So I got a great shipping salmon story. When I was out there last time I was out, I had a 50-pound box of frozen salmon. What I did was I caught all these salmon. We went to Jesse and Justin's house, put them in the freezer, and they froze up nice and tight. And then I realized that the airlines won't let you use dry ice anymore in the containers because it takes the oxygen from the small animals that might be underneath in the cargo hold. So I had to go with ice packs, wet ice, and I pack it up all nice and tight. They got styrofoam boxes. They're made for that. I got 50 pounds. I'm going to go down to the FedEx place to have it shipped. And I said to the guy, how much? He says, $250 anywhere in the continental United States. And I said, so it's $250 if I ship it to Seattle, and it's $250 if I ship it to Boston. He says, yep. I said, well, that just doesn't make sense to me. I says, I don't know what you guys. And then I realized I could pay the extra bag fee on Delta for $35. I'm only 50 pounds. I'm in the range. Yep. So I pack it in. I'm not the only one on the plane. And we hit thunderstorms on the way back, and they put the plane down in Fargo, North Dakota for an indefinite amount of time. And I said, man, they better get this plane back up in the air or there's going to be a whole bunch of smelly luggage under there.
Oh, yes.
That's all I could think about. But then I'm saying, at least it's not me, because sometimes when stupid things like that happen, it's just me. I had half the plane full of salmon that was coming our way. So, but we made it, and the salmon, some of it had, got a little soft, but we survived.
So my salmon story of Alaska is I've been fishing 3 times in Alaska. All 3 times come up with nothing. And I don't even know what I would have done if I caught something, but still caught nothing. And this was 2019, I guess. I flew out to Anchorage, spent the night, and I was taking a plane to Valdez. And our plane lost one engine. We did a couple of figure eights in the air to burn gas, went back to Anchorage, landed, and waited 12 hours to get the next plane because they only had so many planes that could go to Valdez in a day. So I got out there and I was like, hey, I might be stuck here and I need to get back to Boston. So I flew back to Anchorage the next day. And Jim Farrington, who's a friend and he's a business manager for Anchorage Public Schools, I called him up. I says, hey, I'm here for another day before I leave. Want to grab a bite to eat. So we go grab some lunch and I'm going to catch my flight. He says, my friend just caught a whole bunch of fish in Kenai and let's go over and I'll give you some. I was like, what the hell am I going to do with it? Like, I'm getting on a plane in 2 hours.
Carry on. Just take it and carry on.
We went to this outdoor center and I bought a cooler for $30. And I don't even know what kind of cooler this thing is. It's like a soft cooler. This thing has got like better quality than any Yeti or any other thing. I put like 3 ice cubes. This thing was flash frozen. The fish was flash frozen. I put like ice cubes from a gas station in this bag. I'm like, there's no way this is going to hold. It was 17 hours. Landed, pulled it out of my suitcase, and rock solid frozen still. Yep. It was the best salmon I ever had. So now I go there every time I bring my cooler bag with me, so I can bring a couple pieces of fresh salmon home. So, but yeah, my one bring back wasn't my own, and yeah.
I actually kind of did mess up then. I didn't get a chance to fish yet this year. So, because I've actually been here kind of in the hot fishing season, and I really should have been able to bring back a nice box here for Paul, and I guess I kind of failed at that. I might.
Well, when you get home for $250, you can ship it FedEx. $250. Well, that was 10 years ago. Probably
I'm
more
going out there in December, so you can, I can pick it up for you.
Listen, we can trade salmon for Sambuca anytime.
Yeah,
they can't get Sambuca out there where they are, Josh.
No Sambuca.
So here's kind of a combination of politician, resident, and you obviously have a passion for Alaska, and you want to see Alaska flourish. 2% population decrease, $800 million deferred maintenance in schools in Alaska. We've talked about the challenges, trials, tribulations, difficulties. What are some reasons why someone should pack up and move to Alaska to maybe look at a career in the education in the public sector, or in some other, in some other function? But what's some good selling points? I know I got a whole bunch of them. I talk to my family about moving to Alaska all the time. I'm like,
yeah.
I don't think they could do the dark part, but I could do it standing on my head.
Well, I'll tell you why I moved back. So I went away to school in 2004 to study pharmacy, and came back to Alaska in 2008. A little bit, actually, not of my own volition. I had kind of thought I'd stay down in Idaho area potentially, and then my wife's mother got sick, and we decided to move back home to be closer to her, and didn't really think through that very much. But then once I got home and I'd been there for a couple of months, I realized something about the state that I was from. And, as a kid, sometimes for all the reasons that kids hate things, I had not, had that love for my state as I should. And the thing that I actually would tell folks is the opportunity to succeed in Alaska with a little bit of hard work and, a moderate amount of intelligence is off the charts. We really respect people's ability to be an entrepreneur, to start something from scratch, to build something local, to take care of your community. Even the fact that I'm a state representative, that blows my mind. I'm just a normal guy who lives in a normal place and tries to do normal things. And now I get to represent a big group of people. That's a opportunity that's somewhat unprecedented in other parts of the country. And the other thing that I really love about my state is we have just an immense amount of freedom to be what we want. I mean, Alaskan independence is a very big deal. Independent thinkers, independent doers, independent landowners, independent political minds. It's a very great place to be able to just kind of put down roots and be who you want to be and raise your family. Those are my two selling points. Probably a couple of others is the traffic compared to here is way better. You can get from
when the roads are open.
Yeah. 5 miles only takes you 5 minutes instead of 5 hours. We have winter's not as bad as you think. There's a lot of fun things to do in the wintertime. And it's a good place, and we don't have any taxes, so that's a good deal.
So Josh, he quickly touched on going back home because his mother-in-law was ill. His closing that circle, she did eventually pass away, and we came from back east on a hurry. And you'll remember I said, now I was using Josh's product, maintenance and book use of school buildings at the time. And back then there wasn't a lot of internet on planes, that was just coming in. And so I took all my permits. I had a backlog of permits that I had to approve overtime and stuff on the plane because we're in a rush. We got to go. And you don't just go to Alaska like, we get in a commuter plane and go to New York. And I texted Josh from the airplane. I said, I just approved my first permit at 32,000 feet.
Yeah. 36,000 feet because I had a banner.
He had a banner made.
Yeah, I had a banner.
They used it in their marketing department.
Yeah, you were the first person in the world to successfully approve a permit at 36,000 feet. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's.
So how about that? There's closing that circle, Josh, after all these years.
Full circle example. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, Josh and I have known each other since 2004.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about Justin's thoughts and my thoughts. I've been going to Alaska since 2015, and these are my takeaways on Alaska. And I get to visit, right? So I don't live there, but I don't think that what I experience is just for the 3 or 4 days that I'm there at a clip. The sense of community is strongest, I think, in a lot of places in Alaska, right? And I think it's because it's small. I think it's because, I call out, you talk about, you represent 20,000 residents. And just before I say, hey, do you know Lindsay White? Oh yeah, no, she helped me with my campaign and I know her well and da-da-da-da. Like that sense of community, that sense of family is very strong. I think that, overall, there's bad people everywhere, but I haven't met too many bad people in Alaska, right? And it's almost like, kind of when you say the state's all by itself up there, right? So you got to look out for one another. I think that there's a lot of opportunity up there to make a difference. I think that, especially when we talk about the state of the education system as a whole in our country, but I think the state of the education system in Alaska, that there's great room for improvement for people that step up and step in. And there's also probably financial incentives in a lot of the districts because, you need to farm out, talent, and they're probably getting some good incentives in places, in certain places. And again, just that overall, you drive 10 minutes outside any busy area and you're in the deep woods.
You're out with the moose. Yeah, the moose and the caribou.
I really say, Josh, on that point, I've had to do a little bit of traveling more than I normally do of late. And I've noticed something about Alaska now is like, a little bit more of a public figure. And, I come to Massachusetts and it's just, there's people everywhere. And even my wife just remarked to me, she's like, it's actually quite nice. Like, I feel like I can kind of go anywhere and I can be anything here and nobody seems to care. And, and that's actually the reason I like Alaska. I feel like there's a certain measure of keeping your I don't know, neighbors accountable. Like, I mean, if you go out and you have a bad night at the bar and you say a bunch of things you regret, you're saying them to people that you're probably going to see at some point in the next 2 months.
Oh yeah.
And it's I kind of like that aspect of it, of holding you accountable to that community. You don't get away from people that you have a connection to very quickly.
Yeah, no, and it's like you say, I've gone to I've been to Juneau multiple times, Sitka, Valdez, Wasilla, Fairbanks, North Pole, Denali, Nenana, which Paul, I think I told you about that place. They've got an actual dormitory that was I think it was paid for by the Dairy Association originally. And they bring kids from all over the state to learn how to fly planes and also sorts of different programs that other schools don't have in Kenai and other places. And that I go up even after not seeing people for a year or two, and I'll see the same people in places, and it's as if I never left. And I probably would still have accountability if I did something 2 years prior to be like, oh, here comes that jerk that took Millie's 80th birthday party invitation off the bar wall.
Yep.
Which that happened in Nenana. There was an 80th birthday.
He doesn't make this stuff up.
No. It's
most
legit.
of it he's done, and he's left it.
No, well, I mean, you said you spent some time in Juneau. One of my favorite restaurants in the country is in Juneau, which is Salt. I'm hoping it's still open.
It is.
But I think I went in there the year it opened, and I've gone back every time I go back. It's like they remember me, right? And it's like I know that they get a lot of people and tourists that come in and everything, but there's that like I say, that feeling of community in just about any town, USA, Alaska, which is kind of cool. And to be a part of the schools, as far as working in the schools, again, you want to talk about being a part of the community. You are the community in many of those cases. And Paul, in some of those school districts and some of these villages, the schools actually power the village. Their generators actually run the power for the entire village. I mean, these places are really remote. They don't have internet; they have satellite. Their internet is via satellite, and it's still the primitive satellite. It's not like the high speed Elon Musk stuff. So pretty interesting time.
And that is actually changing very quickly. We are running fiber optic cable faster than you can, possibly run fiber optic cable, and we're getting actually gigabyte internet speeds to a lot of rural Alaska. It's a big initiative, big money investment actually through the federal government coming in. We have an office of broadband actually at our state now to get that internet speed up. But I will say actually, one of the downsides to this very big sense of community is actually when you serve in the legislature. So you've been to Juneau, obviously, and you know what downtown Juneau is like, and it's a postage stamp. And so you can't have a bad day in the legislature either, and yell at somebody for being a liberal or being a rhino or something, and then because there is only two restaurants, you're either eating at Salt or the not Salt, and you're seeing somebody. So it pays to play nice.
Oh yeah, there's a what is the hotel downtown? The bar and hotel.
There's a Baranoff.
The Alaska. Is it the Alaskan?
Oh, there's the Alaskan. Yep.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the bartender there was BSing me. One night I said, "What's the Juneau drink of the Alaskan?" And he said it was ginger ale, Jameson, and Tabasco. And he made me a bunch of them because I wanted to one up all the local Alaskans, and I never felt so sick in my life. So
it makes for a bad morning.
All
around, top and bottom.
Absolutely horrible. No, this was great. Glad I got to meet you finally virtually. Hopefully I get to meet you in person one of my trips up to Alaska. I know I'm going up, like I said, I'm going to Anchorage the first week in Alaska. I'll be at the Captain Cook. Captain Cook. Last time I was there, I think was the 9.0 earthquake.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was there. I was I was there the day after 2018. I went in 2019 too, but 2018, and I was there for the 6.7s and the aftershocks. What's amazing is the earthquakes in Alaska, even the strong ones, because of how everything is built now after the big earthquake in Anchorage in the 60s. You barely felt it. You saw the buildings move, but you really didn't feel the the actual earth shaking the way that you would think it would. So
Yep.
you guys get that part figured out. But no, this was great. Thank you for all you do. I didn't get to say that in the beginning, but thank you all for all that you do, in your day job of providing much needed medicine to people that are in need. And then committing yourself to public servancy and we won't get into it, but arguably the worst possible time to be in public servancy, because people lose friends over each other, over who's a Republican and who's a Democrat and all this nonsense. And the reality is, for the most part, I think everybody's just trying to make the world a little bit better place. They just might have a different viewpoint on how they see that happening. So,
well, I appreciate being on this show, and I appreciate actually, because I've listened to a number of episodes in the past, and I appreciate your positive outlook on things, and I think that's needed now more than ever. And I'll leave you with a positive thought, which is absolutely everything you just said is true, and I've seen it actually. Public service is tough for all the reasons you said, but actually, for the most part, Republican, Democrat, or Independent in the Alaska legislature, and I'm sure in other legislatures, the majority of the people that are there are actually just trying to do something good for their community. And if we can put some of those things aside and focus on that, actually good things can happen. And I'm happy to be a part of it. So thanks for letting me be on here. And next time you're in Alaska, Paul's got all my contact info, so we should hang out. You got to come. I'll catch you some fish.
That's what I need. I need a fish catcher. That's what I'm talking about. No, this is great.
You have a shout out here? What's...
Well, first of all, Paul, that sounded like a 5-star rating and review. So when we get done with this, you got to show Justin how to click that 5-star rating and give us a good review so we can add up to it, because that's the next piece after the next piece. Yes, a shout out. I do. I loaded up my tabs with facts, figures, statistics, and things here. So let me just get my tab here for this week's shout out. This week's shout out, the title is School Custodians Help Students Through Mentoring One at a Time. Education support professionals are key players in keeping students safe, healthy, engaged, supported, and challenged. When he started his job in 2003 as a custodian, Larry Everett never dreamed that teachers and administrators would someday summon him on his walkie-talkie to rush over to a classroom because a student is shouting, throwing things, and demanding to talk to Mr. Larry. Sometimes a teacher or guidance counselor will call me on my radio and ask if I don't mind hurrying to room such and such, says Everett. It's usually because there's a student with a problem who says he will only talk to me. In such cases, Everett is called so that students' anger does not escalate. Teachers and counselors at Webster Elementary School in Sumter County, Florida, also know that Everett will discreetly share with them the source of the student's discomfort. I keep them in the loop so we can work together and know how to deal with the issue better next time, he says. Teachers can have 20 or more students to look after at a time. I can focus one at a time. As with Everett, interacting with students daily as well as year in, year out is an integral part of custodial maintenance service work. These education support professionals, ESPs, are some of the most visible staff on campus. Given their first name basis with students, many ESPs are eager to help students attend class regularly, get good grades, behave well on school grounds, and feel safe. There is a huge need to formalize these roles and include all school employees in student discipline, anti-bullying, and school safety professional development, says Roxanne Dove, Director of NEA Education Support Professional Quality Department, currently developing an ESP mentoring program geared toward local affiliates. This is pretty powerful stuff. It is a very long article. I'm going to put the link on the show notes, but this is a absolute awesome story, and he's showing the importance of our custodians and facility professionals that have skilled labor skills that they put into practice every day. But more importantly, they put their human practice in and understanding these kids one-on-one, where instead of calling for their parents or their teacher or whoever, they're calling for the custodian because they're having a problem. So hats off to all of the school mentors all the custodial mentors that are out there, and especially Larry Everett, who was kind enough to share his story in this article. And
nice job, Mr. Larry.
Keep up the good work. Well, Paul, you and I, we'll get on another soapbox for another day about mentorship, because we've been what is it? It's not close the gap.
Yeah, close the gap.
Close the gap. Yeah, close the gap.
That's our mentor statement.
A mentor statement, closing the gap. So we'll get on that soapbox. But I'm gonna let you and Justin go ahead and enjoy the rest of his day because he's flying out tonight. I may do a flyby in the middle of the night and throw a bag out with some shirts so he can go back with something.
Yeah, he's not actually flying out tonight. I want to correct that. He's flying out tomorrow. Tonight he's on his way to the second Red Sox game in 3 days.
Oh well, I mean, when you live in Alaska, that you probably should do that.
Yeah, but he gets to watch the games at 3:30 in the afternoon out there.
Well, that's
How
true
can you
too.
beat that?
That's a terrible time. That's when you're supposed to be working. I like the prime time game.
Yeah. Well, listen, you enjoy it, and we will get you some more Be Awesome swag for you to wear proudly, so that you can get up there with the other Be Awesome supporters. And thank you to the Whites and Kenai that have been supporters since day one. Larry, Tammy, Lindsay, and Lucas, you guys are great, and what a small world to have you on and have that connection. So in the meantime, like I say, if you like this podcast and we're doing a good job, we would really appreciate. We've now crossed the top 10% of all podcasts. There's 3.8 million podcasts out in the world, and we're in the top 10% of them. Are my other podcasts, the Be Awesome podcast, in the top 2.5%. And I want to close that gap, Paul. I want to have two podcasts in the top 3%, and I want you to be on one of them. So if you could give us a 5-star rating and review, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, but do the ratings and reviews either on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, that would help our cause greatly, and we would appreciate it. And hope this was a great episode for you. I told you we're back on track. We're going to stay with it. Paul and I are going to do another episode here in the next week or so, and then you and I, my friend, are on the road. And God only knows.
Mighty Mo.
Yeah. I got the Mighty Owl that's going to go with us, so we'll see who we can pick up and do the 360-degree camera work with, no vibration. So in the meantime, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for all your hard work to the facility professionals and schools taking the 70-day break, aka the most work you probably have to do in a short amount of time of getting the schools back up running, capital projects, cleaning, maintaining, managing, and countless other tasks while there are less people in your buildings before after Labor Day. Keep up the awesome work, and if you can be anything, be awesome. Have a great